approached me at the booth, and he says, I'm just getting into tracking. How do I start? What do I do? Can you boil it down to like a couple, 3 paragraphs? And I'm like, wow, that's some sugaring, right? Because you got to really bring all that down. Then I'm thinking on it while Taylor's telling me all kinds of news. I'm coming up through here and I'm thinking about it in the back of my mind, and I see him and I said, ooh, this is a chance to mix. And he's going to pick up stuff that I might not have left, and he might do it a little bit different from me, but this was something that I'm like, here's the bonus. And the guy says, how do I start tracking? Where do I begin? I got a couple friends that do it, but like I'm not at that level yet, and I'm in pretty good shape. I can kind of get it done. I know hunting. I've hunted a pretty good amount. What do I do? And boil it down to just a little bit. So I'm in the back of my mind, and I've got this down a little bit. So he says this to me, and I said, okay, this is how I would do it. Pick a block of wood somewhere that you want to hunt. So we got a block of woods. Whatever size it is, doesn't matter. This would apply to 13 acres. It would apply to 30,000 acres. Right? But you're not going to find a block of wood that big. It's pretty rare that there is, but say there was. The same, I would go about it in the same method, the same thing. You don't always get snow first thing. You're going to a brand new woods. You don't know nothing about it. You're starting from scratch. You are a gladiator in the ring, and you don't know what's going to be served up, but you have to handle it all no matter what, and you've decided I'm going to track and this is how we're going to do it. I said, first thing I'm going to do is take a look at that on Onyx, right? I'm going to take a look at the area, and I'm going to first figure out access. Is that what you do? Access?
I usually do access. The only thing is, like the areas I hunt, I've been doing it so long, and I usually know my access before I get there, but I understand what you're saying.
Right, that's the first thing I want to know. Where can I get to that land? And also, where are other people going to get to that land?
That's
right?
The big one.
Right, that's really huge. So the first thing I'm going to do is ride up to it. The other thing is, if I know the general wind direction most of the time, that's another very handy thing to do, especially when you don't have snow. If we don't have snow to start out, wind, I like to know which way the wind's blowing. If you have a small, if this chunk we're talking about is 14 acres, is the wind important? You bet, the wind is way more important than that than it would be at 30,000 acres. However, I like to know which way the general prevailing winds go in that block of woods. So if I pull up to it with the truck, and I get right here, I turn on my Onyx, and I see that there's been some cutting and there's some landings. There's access points to that property. Whether it's a farmer's gate, whether it's just an open field and there's a place for me to pull off the road. And I'm also, as I pull up to all of these, I'm going to take a ride around that block of woods. I'm going to go have a look at it and see it from the road. I just want to see the general shape of it, what it looks like. You could do the same thing if you were fishing. See the access to the fishing area. Look at all of that. That's what I want to do. I want to see where people are likely to come and go from it. And once I've understood that and I know where the prevailing winds are and the generalness, and let's say there's no snow in this situation, and I'm going to go up in here for the first time. This has a couple of mountain peaks, a bunch of fingers that stick out in directions. The red is access points where people would come and go from. That I want to start breaking this whole thing down. Now, one of the things that today was going to be about was like timelines. You have the timing of your vacation when you can hunt. You have the timing of the rut and when things were going to happen. You have like the deer's timing. You have the timeline, say there's snow here, you have the timeline of the track for that day. You're going to have to take all these different like timing of the rut, deer behavior. You're going to take all these patterns and overlay them and try and find those pinch kind of spots where everything will come together for that timing. And of course you have your timing of when you can go, how good you are, what's going on. There's tons of things and tons of decisions to make. But I'll ride around the first thing and find all the access points and I'll mark them on the GPS. I want to know where all the places I can come and go from that block of woods. If I end up killing a deer way up here and I started down there, I know right here I'm out. I can drag that way. So I'm marking all the access to that block of woods. I like to know where everything is, and I'll also know where people are likely to come in from. So if I'm over here hunting and working my way around, and there's likely to be a push from both directions, I'm going to be coming through here for too long if I'm just out walking around. And I'm also going to use the wind to my favor. And a lot of times, if this is a real small piece of woods, I wouldn't start over here. I'd be starting on this side and walking this way because of prevailing winds, right? I don't want to spoil that 13 acres if that's all we have. So I would work my way in around like that. That makes sense? That just like, that's a good start. Now, as I go across all of that, I'm going to be looking for, say there's a scrape line. Let's go to maybe the first week in November, right? Let's say you have the whole month of November to hunt. You're lucky as Rodney, you get the whole month of November to hunt. That first week of November, the bucks aren't moving that far. They might lay down just a little bit of sign. Okay, so if I find a little bit of sign someplace, say I find a couple of great big tracks and a whole bunch of rubs or something, and it's the first week in November, I'm going to want to hunt a quarter mile around that sign right there, because odds are good in the last few years, especially I want to say in the last 10 years, with our bare ground hunting first thing right out of the box. Wherever we found a buck in the past, in that first week in November, odds are good he's going to be in that same general area. And if I find a little bit of sign, they've been right there. And that's allowed us to get quite a few bucks on bare ground first thing right out of the box because of that. And if we know he lives someplace like that, it's also your best chance to kill like a legend buck. You get a big buck that he hangs out, he's 5, 6, 7 years old. You want to hunt that deer either first thing or probably at the end of the season. That first thing, he ain't expecting it, everything's brand new, you're starting in for the year, and you could do it. This last season, we get out of the truck, we go up in the woods right where this big thing, and he's right there, and we jump him first thing right out of the truck. 300 yards, and I'm like, oh, Ryan and I were both coming apart because but it worked. And that mentality of going after that big one first thing and getting the first crack at him, he's the biggest and heaviest, and it's surprise, surprise, right? The deer are so good that it doesn't take them only but a day or two of listening to trucks. They listen to gunshots, and the next thing you know, they got their head down. Them big old boys, they are on it, and they don't miss a trick. And if you want that big giant one of the best times is first thing right out of the box, first day or two right there. And it would be the same thing for bow and arrow as well. The first day you walk into, there's something magical about going into a spot for the first day, first time, surprise, surprise. Having it a surprise as much as you can during your hunting season is really good. And them big ones learn so fast, and it'll only take them a few times. I don't know how many deer have learned from so many times of almost dying, right? Every stunt they ever pulled in their whole life, they learned. And they picked up something every single time, and they lived through it. That gives them a learning curve. And of course, whatever you do, you're training them as well. You bump them out of there, ooh, you're probably not going to do it again. You can pull some of these stunts in big woods. If you go to your small woods, you don't want to do that, unless you only have that one little tiny bit of time to hunt. I'll try and hunt during that first week around any buck sign that I come across. When you get into the second week and they're zombie walking by like the 14th, probably the 12th to the 15th, and they're doing that zombie walking stuff, they've got that, I need to go find a doe. But there isn't any in heat yet, and they start that circulation across the landscape. Well, say that's the case now. This is all covered with snow, and I need to start in. I could take off from pretty much any spot and just cut across it and look for a track. Joe Donito, right? Get on it and just go find something. If that happens to be the case, first time we come here and there's snow on the ground, I'm gonna like this landing or this landing first. And I'm also, if they're all coming in here, if I drive right by those and come up here first thing in the morning and I leave those landings alone and they see truck tracks coming this way, where are they gonna go? They're gonna pull in here, right? If you're a little early that day, right? So I'm keeping the other hunters in mind. I'm keeping what they might do as they come in, and I'm on the right wind. That makes sense, right? I'm picking those locations to start hunting from. Number one, by the wind, and keeping it to my advantage, letting the other hunters do what they do and come in by that, and it might benefit me. And if I've already been here a few times and I know where the strings of sign are, and they come in right there and they jump them and he runs downwind and he doesn't smell me and he runs into me, had radish, right? So the point I'm trying to get across is that there'll be tons of patterns, and you're trying to get all the patterns of forest type, edges, the island effect, all those things to come together so that you can draw a bottleneck of the few small key places that will work. Now I tried my best to explain this to this guy in that way, but I didn't take this long. I said, try and find where all your patterns overlap in those spots. Now, when I look on Onyx and I see the edge of a spruce line or something, and I see the type of bottlenecks that I'm seeing there, now when I go to a new block of woods, I use that same information on the next block of woods, and I say right here, right here, right here, right here. Just like the bass fishermen, same type of thing. I'm doing that everywhere, and that matters like crazy.
Your hunting structure instead of fishing structure.
Yes, basically. The island effect, the lily pads, and the bass was underneath the lily pads. Well, guess where that buck is probably bedded down? In that swale grass, that one spruce tree. Where are you going to look? Under that spruce tree, right there, that's where the bass would be. It's the same type mentality, right? And also too, by watching where the other fishermen would fish from, where they would start, I'm keeping all of those patterns in that mental up here to be able to do it. Now, if I know the woods, I can hunt faster. I know them. I know where the trails are, where the saddles are. I know those things. Well, that's one of the things about hiring a guide, right? He knows all those patterns. He's been there before. If you've never been out before, and here you go, and you hire them, right? And they say, go through here and walk through that saddle. He doesn't have to explain it all to you, why the other guys and where and how the deer would move. He just says, do this, and you cut right in there and go to it, right? That's what when you're a guide, that's what they're paying you for, to put those patterns together. Now, if you're doing it on your own, and you get to a guide, whether he's good or not, you'll know yourself. So if things aren't working out and you say, ooh, I know what I know, and right there looks pretty good to me, and he says, okay, go ahead and try it. And boom, right? That can come together for you. That is good stuff. Like,
all you're really doing as a guide is you plan percentages. Deer, they're unpredictable. All wild animals are unpredictable. But if you're a really good guide, the best that you can hope for, and again, I'll just pick on Dave because he's been with me a lot. I'm just taking educated guesses, and like if you're right 75% of the time, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because at least 25% of the time, the guy, like, geez, they usually cross right here. I just jumped him. Why don't you go out on the road and go down here or whatever? And maybe, because we sometimes, if I have good enough clients, I like to tag team bucks. A lot of times they're not good enough, but if they're repeat clients that are good, I'll tag team them even if I'm not carrying a gun,
Right.
And if you can get it right 75% of the time, you're doing good, but that's the best you can hope for. They're educated guesses, and that's what they're paying you for, is to know something they probably don't know.
oh, sure. But if you look at the average person walking into a brand new chunk of woods, maybe 10%.
Maybe.
Right? So what's better, 75 or 10%? Right? That's a huge advantage. That is a big advantage. So keeping that in the back of your mind, right? It's almost like the difference between fishing and learning to fish. You really want to learn to fish, or do you just want fish? Right? That part of it matters like crazy, and it makes a huge difference. Now, there's a lot of other factors that go into that, but that's kind of the gist of it. And when you start putting these patterns together in your head, now like there's this telescoping effect. These guys teach you something, somebody else teaches you something, and you take all of those little ideas and you put them in your mental trash can. You decide whether it's good advice or not, whether it works for you or not. And now you take all of those little small bits and you put them together and you figure out what works for you. I don't know how many times you might give advice and it might not be good. It might be good advice for you, but it might not work for them, right? So like success means clarity, right? People who are successful, they have some clarity to it. Rick, right? He has some clarity to what he does. We have to do X, Y, Z, and this is how you go about it, and this is what works. Now, that bringing together and like all the knowledge dependency that comes because it's required to know everything, puts the burden on yourself. And like he says, there's a certain amount of chaos that is happening here no matter what that you can't control. right? Other hunters, the weather situation, the deer numbers, who knows, right? All of that is a chaos that you can't control. But if you at least play your odds the best you possibly can, it makes a tremendous difference.
And the other thing, don't want to hog too
No,
much.
no, I
Rodney's
want you to
time,
hog as much as you want.
It's like when Edison invented the light bulb, he failed like 200 times or whatever. And they said, you know, you failed 200 times. He says, well, no, not really. I just found out 200 times how to not make it. When you're hunting deer, the best teacher is trial and error. You can come in here, it's good. Rodney can teach you some stuff. I could. Everybody can teach you some stuff, and you should listen. But you're going to have to go out there and fail. You're going to have to fail a bunch of times. That's how you become successful, is through failure. Something that Hal and I have told people for years. When they come to Maine, they see big woods bucks or they see mountain deer and they watch all the videos. And right now, it's kind of like a romantic, sexy thing to track deer, right? Everybody wants to track deer and kill a 200-pound buck in the snow. Well, guess what? The people that come, they either love it or hate it. And it's got nothing to do with the success. It's they come, and if they're not willing to learn, they're not going to like it, because it's not easy. It's tough. It's like the same thing you see professional athletes. The guys that get out of college that are great athletes, if they show up in the big show and they think they're going to be successful, they're not. It's a whole new level, and you've got to change your attitude and be humble and just say, you've got to learn. You've got to work hard and learn.
Be open, right? It's real important to be open. Most of the time, you're the limiting factor. What a huge, huge thing. No question about it. Over time, as you start like taking these little bits and sharpening yourself, don't be upset if things don't work for you, right? Because like he said, if things don't work out and you start picking apart, why didn't it come together and what was the reasoning behind it? That timeline, when we get into that timeline type stuff, we get where I can see it here. I'll hold them just a whisker. We can stay right on week 2 here, right? I'm sure you're seeing the same exact thing. When they're on their feet and they're just going, and they feel there's not a great lot of does in heat yet, and they're doing this walk thing. They almost like don't lay down, they have a nibble, and they keep right on going. This is when the track timeline will be very long, because he's moving cross country, he's going a long ways. I think this section between like the 12th and the 15th, we never saw a buck bad. They never laid down. They were just like going and searching. Now, if there's a lot of hunting pressure, he can't just run all over the place, so they'll go to security cover and wander around, even if it's slowly, like they want to be on their feet, they're restless and they're going. I'll watch Facebook, all the trail camera pictures. I don't have to set out a trail camera picture. I can watch everybody else's trail cameras and see the dates, and you say, oh, all the big ones are on their feet. They're going. Look at him walk. He's just walking and walking and walking. This is when, if you get on a buck track, it may be a long, long ways away. He may never find anything, and you may go miles and miles without catching him. And I think we only caught one buck. We only caught up to one of the bucks. And there's 5 or 6 of us tracking every single day with good legs going right along. And even some of them were not big bucks, and we still could not catch up to them. And they're in these tight cover where they won't meet anybody. Sometimes on a cliff where there isn't even any deer around, and it's like, why is he in this boulder pile walking around in this mess? It's because he feels restless and I need to do something, but I don't dare, right? So that they'll have these little tight areas where they need to get out and get away. We've been seeing a lot of that last few years. And of course, as soon as that hunter pressure ramps up, now he even may slow his activity, not go as far distance-wise, but he'll be like, oh man. So if you're around here versus where we are, they'll walk a long ways up there and they'll feel comfortable going cross country, where here they will not. So they'll, in that little small tight areas, keep that in the back of your mind while you're doing it. And of course, I want to start stringing different buck signs together, and I want to do that from lot to lot to lot. If I have a block of woods I'm going to hunt, I'll string together the sign there, I'll string together the sign over here, and now I'll also look at where the people sign is and say, okay, this is likely where we're going to meet it, and I can narrow down all that woods with nothing in it. There's so much woods that are near empty. That is probably our number one problem. There's no deer. There's no deer in most of them woods. In places, there's just nothing there. So, like, there's so much woods without deer in it, and then there's a few that are focused in places.
Chris needs me. I don't know if
Thanks
I'll
a
be
lot.
back.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yep. Take care. Yeah, so it is what it is. Keep that in the back of your mind, you know, as you go.
Thanks, Rodney.
No problem. Have fun. The doe areas, as you get to the end of this week, doe areas are going to be more important because they're going to be pulling into them, checking on them, checking beds, checking food, seeing what's up. Also, too, they may be a little bit more interested in other buck. If there's a buck in their area, how many times you see a big buck walk another buck off? Get out of here. So you might see two big buck tracks in the same going right along, or a big buck and a small buck. We have a fair amount of that we see during that time frame. And bucks checking on each other and laying down a little bit of sign. They, if anything, during this period, visit sign. They come to it, go through, or they'll just breeze by it, smell it from a distance, and keep right on trucking. I don't know how many signposts the bucks went right by them. They just went, oh, nobody's been there, and kept right on going. Side hill, all the wind coming down the mountain, they'll side hill. You see quite a bit of that as well. As you move into week 3, and we're like the 16th to the 24th, and we're chase phase now. They're on does that smell really good. They're pushing them a little bit, even though some of these activities can happen at any time. And the rut is like this big curve up to the 22nd, 24th of November, and then it drops off into December with a little blip. If you like drew the rut curve, that's kind of what it is. In Vermont, we take roadkill survey, we open up the does, we take the fetuses out in the spring, we lay them on the tailgate of the wardens are laid on the tailgate of the truck. They have a timeline written on a plastic tape measure of dates. They lay the fawn right on the tape measure, and you can see when the fawn is conceived. You know, and November 22nd seems to be the peak rut for our deer in Vermont. So if you consider the latitude, that's pretty much New England. Most of that real peak of the breeding is just, you know, Thanksgiving week. That's when things have really happened, and I'm sure that's probably what you guys are finding. That's what I'm seeing in general. Bucks are definitely focused on does like crazy. Get right up to them, check them. They're running from bed to bed to bed and going, all that kind of stuff. That's a big deal as well. Hunting the security cover. The does are going to want security cover because they're being pushed. It's also, this is a week when you'll see a lot of like maybe lulls in the distances that the bucks will go. Maybe a little bit of that. They'll get with a particular doe and they won't be traveling cross country, and guys will say, man, I can't find a big track. That'll be a kind of normal. Tracks can be a little bit hard to come by on certain days, and then a few days later, all of a sudden you can come across them. That's kind of normal as well. And of course, this is the week you hunt all day long, nonstop. And even week 2, I want to be all day long, nonstop. That is 100% definitely.
I thought you guys like sleeping in for breakfast.
Right? Oh, sure. Yep. Week 4. Are you seeing a lot less does in heat? You guys see a lot less does in heat on week 4? You know, that last week in December, and the buck activity starts.
I would say so.
There's more ranging. You'll see buck checking beds and going farther. Like the track timeline in general is quite a bit longer. During that 4th week, it's stretched back out again. There's not quite as many doe in heat, and they're doing more checking and going. Definitely circulation. Calling, they've been hearing a lot of calling because they're still alive. Right? They're grunting and following does. They're still alive. However, they may react not so good to loud calling. The calling will work, but it has to be a more careful call and not too aggressive. And if it comes with other things with it, it helps. A little bit of movement, a little bit of sound. If it's a little crusty and you're calling real light with your tipper can, right? Be easier with your calls, and they'll work just fine. But that part of the month, this is what we've been finding. And of course, they're a little more likely to bed down, actually take a break. They've been rutting for quite a while. They're a little bit more tired. The feeding sections of the walking will be quite a bit longer. Most of the time that's the case. They'll feed for a bigger distance and then park. So that's a good idea that you know you're getting into just about either the kitchen or the bedroom, hopefully. So that part of it will help just a little bit. And then of course there's good old December. When you get right into the main part of December, they're really now ready to take a break. I have to say though that in the last 10 years or so, I have been seeing them not even bother taking a break. Like they're still rutting and still going kind of nuts. It's like, man, they're still going at it. Even at the end of Vermont muzzleloader season, which is like one of the later seasons except for Massachusetts, of the three upper part of those states, right, our season runs the latest, and boy, they're still running around and rutting and going crazy. So that part of it, lately, I haven't seen this shut down, eat, bed down, get up, eat some more, and lay back down again. Just not seeing that like we used to, and of course the snow isn't there. Whenever there is snow, you're way more likely to see them eat, lay down, get up, eat some more, and lay back down. The other thing about this week, and one of my hunting strategies, is always be on top of deer tracks. If you're in woods where there's any amount of at least decent snow from 6 inches and up, you want to be standing on top of deer tracks all the time. As winter starts to settle in a little bit, nearly all deer will walk on top of other deer tracks. And I'm sure you guys are finding that as you're out around. Everything seems to focus in these new, one deer will run off the hill and it'll turn into a runway by the end of the week. Other deer will get on it and follow it. So all of your movement through the woods, even if you're not tracking, you want to be on top of deer tracks all the time. If you're in the December woods and you're not standing on top of deer tracks, you're in the wrong place. If you're walking around and there's no deer tracks there, you're in the wrong place. Get out of there and get to any amount of tracks. I want to be on top of those all the time. They get that mentality, I need to follow it. If a moose runs down off the hill, the buck will hit that and run right down those tracks. It's just something about that. In their brain, that's what they want to do. And I keep that in mind. If there's a huge bottleneck of tracks going through an area and I'm going to cross that area, I'm walking on that bottleneck. I am definitely going on it. And if something comes this way or is standing on the sides of it and I see it, I'm lined right up. I want them to come right to me. Any amount of calling here, especially from chase phase on, any amount of calling, say you have a buck chasing a doe and he's chasing her right towards you, do not call with the doe right there. I am real cautious about that, because if she is coming and she busts you and runs off, the buck will cut the corner. He'll see or he'll smell or he'll hear the change and he'll cut the corner and never come to you. Let her go by you if you can. Whenever you're walking, you're using the edge, making cover for yourself so that you can get by the doe to get to the buck. The does will screw you up at least 50% or more of the time, those extra deer. And the more deer there are in a group, all the more being careful with it. And two, a lot of the calling, that tipper can is magic, because it's a real kind of easy call. It's not fairly aggressive. It'll keep deer from coming apart. Do you have some of those deer clips?
Yes,
The live buck clips? These are the small bucks. Yeah, that one there is good.
Want to do that one?
Yep.
You guys can come on in if you want.
Yeah, it's actually cool in here. Yeah, squeeze in wherever it seems
right
good.
Up front. We got
Sure.
seats.
Yeah, right over whatever.
Here, come on in.
This is one of those buck escort kind of things where a buck is on another buck. A big buck track crosses the road, drops down into a swamp. I come onto it. I said, oh, I'm going to take this thing, drop down in. Old friend of mine. I go down his track. I go down in there about 150 yards or so, and there's a small buck coming up my older buck track. So it's fairly fresh. And as it's coming up to me, all of a sudden it turns and it goes out this way. Whenever you come to your tracking intersections, stop and check them out. I try not to walk where there's like a junction. I don't want to step on that. And I pull up to it and I look, and it's a little buck coming up the big buck, and it turned and went out on this side, and the wind is going that way and he's on my downwind. So I said, there's a little buck right there. So I call real quiet and easy, just a little tiny grunt. And nothing, and I said, okay. So I just keep, now my head is saying, watch the right. So I continue. I don't really care about him. He's not that big, but we'll see. So I start down through the woods a ways. My big buck track starts to hook on the downwind just a little bit, and I'm saying to myself, if he's over there, he's going to smell me. My wind is going that way, right at him. So I'm watching over here, and then I look down my buck track and I see some movement on the big buck track in front of me. I look down through, and it's the little guy. He's come right back onto my big one and started back down the hill a little bit. Now I've been calling real gentle to him, and I pick him out in the brush standing there in front of me. Now, while he's standing there, I want to be the biggest, deepest I can. So if the big one is on the other side, he comes up and kicks his butt and I shoot him, right? The big one could be just past him a ways. He's my decoy. I'm using him as a decoy for the one beyond. Don't want to go too crazy and bust him or scare him off, but I want to hold him there. So it looks like he might leave, and I called again to just try and hold him. I want to keep him right there. And of course I'm having fun filming him, but I'm nervously watching for the big one in case I have to drop the camera and shoot, right? Because the big one might come up, but I'm going to use him as a warning too. If he moves or does anything, that means the big one's right there. But I wanted the big one to have a chance. Now he's a little, what's this? You can tell the way he walks off.
This is Vermont here?
No, that's Maine. And now he's putting on the I gotta get out of here. And Dad told me the big one isn't there. If the big one was down there and he knew about it, he would not go running at the big one. Little bucks do not run at big ones. They get their butt whipped, right? You don't go running up to a giant guy, right? If all of a sudden when he decided to walk away from me, he busted off and jumped sideways, I'd know the big one was down there. He'd be scared of something. If he went in left or right, that was the time I'd know what was going on. And of course I'm looking at woods, I don't know what's down below him, but here he is. And the way he just, hoo-hoo, right? Little bucks, when they move through the woods, especially if you scare them hard, their programming runs right back to mom. I don't know how many of you have ever chased a doe for any length of distance. When she understands that you're after her, they come unleashed. They'll say, here's a mile and a half, and they'll go right up a 3,000 footer, get to the cliff, stand on top, and stand there with their knees shaking, seeing if you're coming. Does come unleashed, and they need to do that in order to protect the other deer that are with them, their fawns and stuff, and they want to announce to everybody, there's a problem down there. But just the way he reacted and the way he went was nice and easy, and it was like, I'm out of here and I'm not a problem. He knew that could be a buck, no problem, and he just kind of moved off. So I'm like, okay, it's cool, I can go. And I went walking right down through there, no problem, and he actually peeled right off, and my big track kept going. So that was a good way to make that encounter work for me if that big one was right there someplace. Always use the deer you have as like a decoy if you can. It's worth a try for sure. Let's go to one of the other ones.
You want the one I did?
Yeah.
Pardon the raw footage here.
Yeah, these are all just clips that we haven't put together yet, but we're gonna.
Run.
Now Taylor comes on to a track. If you want to tell this part, you.
Yeah, sure. So we use this a lot when you talk about educating deer. And you talk about how whenever you run into them and you don't get them, you actually teach them something, right? Every run-in, every trick, like Dad was saying earlier, has always worked for them, right? They've always gotten away, so they have these patterns, they have these things. But anytime we hunt, we track, we teach, we have close encounters, they are now putting that in their memory bank, right? This is not just putting food on the table, this is life and death for them. They're on it, they're full-time deer. Right? And you can see an experienced deer by the way they react to different experiences, right? So I've already filled my buck tag, but I have a doe tag. I'm just going up hunting some grass trails to try to get up into some bigger woods. And I look up through the woods and I see an ear and some antlers sticking up over the grass, right? And the wind's about a quarter value to the right. You know, it's not full on yet, but it's blowing pretty good. And all I have is my big camera, so pardon the zoom is terrible. But I see him coming and I said, well, I'm going to try to bring him down to me. You know, he's a smaller buck. I think I can get him to come down. I'll just do some just real light, kind of really light, gentle grunts, right? You don't want to sound like a big dude, hey, you want to go?
Little bucks don't like that.
So if he's a smaller buck, a kind of a lighter, less intimidating grunt will probably work a little better. So I give it a go. I don't know if you can see him. He's right about there.
Yeah, you can see his horn sticking out right there.
Once
he starts moving, you'll see him a lot better.
Yeah. And he starts bobbing around to try to see if he can get some wind in me, but and here he comes.
All of a sudden he committed, okay, I'm coming. And he's even a little bit of cowboy walk, but he's coming.
The wind comes right up my back and goes right to him.
Boom.
Boom. and you can see how fast is it, right? That is actually an experienced buck. He's probably 2.5, 3 years old, but he knows that smell. He's had a run-in with somebody else, right? That's perfectly good evidence that he's a fairly educated buck. As soon as, and it was just like a super gentle, right? I'm right out in the open, but the visual didn't bother him or anything, or he didn't really make me out that well. And you can see, like, what does he cover? 30 feet in 1/10 of a second, right?
Yeah.
And just
boom,
gone.
Yeah.
Horrendous, right?
Yeah, the
so
speed.
Now, what has also happened is he has had a run-in with the scent, but now he's also paired a grunt with that. So now, if I were to get close to this buck again and go, that's probably not gonna work, right? So definitely trying to mitigate scent, or try to use something a little lighter, a little different to him. Maybe an aggressive call early season a little bit. Snort wheeze might work. Tipper can will probably bring him right down in. But you know, trying to not educate them too much and change your game up every time definitely helps.
And if it's something that you're going to hunt on a steady basis, you can sometimes fool the eyes and the ears, but the nose knows, right? And the second you get into like legend deer, like 5 years old and more, man, one little thing, they're so good at picking you up on you and what you did and how you did it, that really plan on them being somewhere where you can get to them without them knowing you're there. Especially if you're in small lots and you're doing, you gotta plan it so that you don't have that nose knows. And even if it's 12 hours later, the nose still knows. They're so good, and I don't think you can ever not smell like a person. Like no matter what, you're gonna smell. And I don't think you can fool a deer's nose any more than a dog's. You know, you have a giant warehouse and you put a plastic container with dope in it, in the side of another plastic container on row 24 on you know, shelf 5 way up near the ceiling, and the dog will walk right up and say right there, right? They're that good, and they of course are doing this for a living, so it's super important that that be the case. The other thing is, don't over worry about the wind though. Whenever I'm tracking and the deer goes downwind and I know my scent is blowing down that track, I'm not going to go super slow, because my scent's going to go down in there and blow it. So I'm going to go at about the speed of the wind, and as quiet as I can and as efficiently as I can without blowing it, and doing the best I can, right? You're always trying to make your speed balance between efficiency and getting it done, right? So sometimes you may have to go a little quicker at the end of the day, you may have to go a little quicker downwind. Like I'm going through my checklist of why I should move, how fast I should move, and the reasons. And then of course every time that it didn't work, or some little thing happened, that's up here too, right? So that I can help fix that a little bit.
But the grunt would have worked on him, right? If I had a buck tag, he'd have been dead, right? Right top of the grass line, below the white patch, bang.
As he was walking,
That'd have been it.
as he was walking, he'd have got it right there.
The mixing, the calling and tracking, and trying to do something to take away the sense and get to hold them is really what you're looking for. If you're going to be on the ground with them, you know, the calling has been so effective. It educates deer wicked well, right? If they get away, it educates them like a bugger. But all you need is to hold them for a few extra seconds.
The other thing that's super important when you're hunting ever, and it doesn't apply to just tracking, is that when you're moving through the woods, picking the right places to walk through the woods is super important. Kendall Gray and I go out in the woods, and he's not used to going across country. He's a Kentucky hunter, right? And here we are, and he's like, how y'all know where to walk, right? And I'm like, well, first we're gonna walk where we have shooting lanes and visibility, but we're not super exposed, so that we're showing all the deer us, but we're also trying to walk through so that we are able to see something if it jumped out. He's got a shooting lane there. Keeping a shooting lane all the time, everywhere I go, I'm trying to do that all the time. I'm using the island effect. If there's a big blowdown in a big maple top busted off and a huge hardwood hillside, I'm going to watch that top all the time. And guess where I'm going to walk to? That top, right? Same as that bass fishing, that island effect of those places and the edges. Deer are animals of the edge. You're on the edge of everything. Where are you going to scan? I'm going to scan all the drop-offs, all the corners, all the edges, right? If you're going to take out your binoculars and scan, I'm going to look at that brush pile first. I'm going to look wide open to see things that are obvious, and then I'm going to go slow and pick over all the edges where I would expect to see a deer. And then I'm not surprised when I do. A million guys say, I was so surprised. It was such a, oh, I couldn't believe it was there. Well, that's not the case for me, because most of the time I'm expecting to see them, and I can almost, after a while, you'll be able to do the same thing. You'll say right here and right there and right there, and then look at it quick and good. Make sure they're not in the wide open. I hate it when they're wide open, obvious, and I'm not even looking at them. So I'm doing the big eyes. Make sure. Now go through and pick over the parts and pieces and look at it good. Now go back to them real thick spots and focus on them, and especially watching for movement all the time. That's what the deer do. They have big eyes and they're waiting for movement. Those big flat pupils see everything on the horizon. That 270 degrees they see all the time. You kind of have to do the same thing, and I'm watching for that movement. As far as shooting, every time I stop, I'm ready to shoot. Every time I start walking, I'm ready to shoot. Those are the times when the deer are going to move and things are going to happen. How many times did you stop? You stood there for a second and then whew, and off they go. That happens all the time. Be ready to shoot at start and stop. Yep.
If he were to drop down to the ground, would his scent still carry? Because that grass would disperse your scent.
It might help, but one of the things that I also lose my visibility.
Can't see anymore.
Right. So you're trying to make that decision. But if you're trying to bring him in, yeah, you could try it. You could try it.
Staying hidden when deer are coming right at you, very important. Because anything that's out of shape as they come down the path, you watch videos on YouTube or Facebook or Reels or something, and you see a deer coming right at the camera. And most of the time they nail it before they get to it. They're so good. And if it's a buck and a doe and they're coming right at you, oh, be careful. Same thing with a moose. Don't move. I would say to the boys, don't move. Don't move. And the cow's coming right down the path right at us. And it's pretty rare that they don't, within 15 or 20 feet, they've definitely got you by then. They're looking for that, any little thing out of place, and they really watch right in front of them while they're on the interstate. You watch the road. That's what the deer do. They're the same thing. They're focused on what's in front of them while they're moving. Oh, and they don't miss a trick. Yeah. We've got one more buck too, don't we? Do you have Jimmy's when...
Spike?
Yeah. Now Casey and Jimmy go on a track, and it's just a small buck, but Casey says, let's just go see. Come on, let's just go down in there. So Casey and Jimmy walk down this track, and they get just down in the swamp. It's a smoking fresh track. And he's like, I think it's right here. Let's just go down in. So they get down in there a little ways, and they do the tipper can. This little buck turns around and comes right back. Now he's looking for them after being called to. And it's just a 1.5-year-old buck. And you can see his horns. It's like he had spikes and they're snapped right off. His horns are busted right off. I'm sure he's alive right now. Right? That saved him. Jimmy might have flattened him maybe. Right? Now he's checking. Now they're squatted down right now. They're right down near the ground right now. And he's already kind of on them. And they're in some of that swale grass. Probably, did Casey have a better view there, Jim?
No, we're
about the same. Oh, you were side by side? Yep, yep. And this is just at the beginning of the zombie walking, you know, for rut timing. So he's been moving around. He's interested. Now the little small, they'll have a little small breakdown. A big one won't break down quite like this. Not too often you see big rackers doing these kind of things. This is more young deer, right? Definitely like young deer behavior.
Like you're saying, he's learning right now, figuring out.
Oh yeah, oh he's getting an education right here. Oh yeah.
Beautiful deer though.
Now he thinks it's a deer, so he shows the other deer his side. And he can hear them whispering, but that doesn't hurt anything. He doesn't mean much to him.
Now will bucks stomp the ground like does?
Sometimes. Sometimes.
Yeah.
See that? He just,
Boy, does that work. And he was committed to leaving.
he was committed to leaving him. Oh, what?
Right? How many shots could you guys have got off? A ton.
Right, it buys you time, right? So that's why tracking and calling works so good, because it could buy you getting into the shooting lane. It could buy you getting the tree out of the way and getting the shot. It could make him hesitate. He might jump from you and go bang, bang, stop. Bang, right? Now you get the shot. I don't know how many times I've jumped them, they stopped, I called to them and then fired, and they heard me call, the thing goes through them, boom, and he says, oh, I don't know what that was, but there are deer over there, and they've run to me after I've called them and shot them. They came running right at me. I'm like, that's the best way to go. Come right up here. I'll give you another one. Right? Right? That is something that's definitely worth a try. Not that it's going to work every time, because that of course that's not going to. But like, you're just trying to give yourself those extra few seconds. This made an extra what, 30, 40 seconds of film, right? So like, you can buy some time.
Could you just sum up how you're using a bleed call versus grunt call versus rattling like throughout the season? Do you have like one where you're leaning on early season versus towards the middle? I know you said light grunting or towards the
right. A lot of times I'll do whatever the spot calls for, whatever that particular deer would call for. If I'm on a great big huge buck and he's been feeding, and I get over to the bed and he's gotten up and he's walked off a little bit and there's a big blowdown and a bunch of garbage right there, I'm going to grunt, and I'll grunt easy at first and just wait, and if nothing happens, give him another harder one, and he might respond, which is what Grunt Buck did. Grunt Buck responded with the harder one, and they said, we just heard a grunt. So they're like, now we're really gonna, like a turkey, you give it to them what they like, so they give him a snort wheeze and a scratch, 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 right? And now he's like really bunga, 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 right? And now he's moving and you're not, so you see him, bang. That kills a lot of deer.
That's showing signs of like aggression and frustration. Like he's tearing trees up, lots of scrapes. Like one of the things that if you go back and watch that film, is like he laid 14 scrapes and like 3 rubs in like 8 feet. Like this deer was hammering the sign, right? Laying it all down fresh. So we knew that he's laying it down. I'm something, here I am, right? And it was like, well, if we go in and we can kind of grunt nice and light and have that, we're a smaller buck going, hey, what's going on? He'll be like, oh,
I can take him.
Dude around here, right? You're just little guys talking shit. Let's see what he's made of. So as soon as we hear the, and he grunts. So he had probably heard us coming. We get up to that 4-way, stop, where he bolt all his tracks. He was probably listening like this, and then he cuts off and goes downwind and hooks up into that little bowl where we were.
And it was a big clump of stuff.
We find the 4-way stop, and we, and then he, up there, and it's like, here we go, right? He's within earshot, so it's snort wheeze, Casey scuffs the ground like we're making a scrape, and then get low, right? Get nice and low. Hide our profile, hide our silhouette, because it's a little bit more open behind us and we don't want to be silhouetted, 2 figures stand out there. So we get nice and low down in by the spruces and then just dead silent, right? And if he's a little bit younger or he's real confident, he won't wait. He'll come right down to see what it is. And he comes right down into the open. Where is he? I know he was here. And as he walks down, he's doing this. I knew you guys were down there. And we've got him, right?
The other thing is he had sufficient cover.
More that buck grunt calling, because we knew the attitude of the deer too. If you have a smaller buck that's not laying down a ton of sign, probably a snort wheeze and real aggressive grunts and stuff probably aren't going to work, right? He's not the biggest guy. You know, into the season when they're getting thrown around by other deer, sometimes they're a little more timid, you know, to coming into other bucks, because like I'm fighting everybody, so it's like, do I need to get my butt kicked again today? So it's that kind of mentality. So you'll have to gauge the buck as to, you know, what kind of calls you should use.
The little 3-pointer there might have responded really good to a tipper can. Instead of grunting, if I'd have done the tipper can, he might have turned around, come right back up through, right? It's more of a passive, easy, hey. Like if a lady's out here and she says, hey, we'll all go home. Right? Like there's this like overall feeling of that part of the communication. They're communicating. You know when your dog makes this certain bark, you know what it means, right? They're kind of the same thing, and I would just apply it to whatever that needs. Most of the time, if I think he's fairly close, I want to call real easy. especially because, and I'll call very little because I don't want to know exactly where I am. If he's over here crunching away and I just do a little meh and he goes, whoo. That's better than if I say, hey, I'm definitely here and I'm right over here. Like deer, moose, turkeys, they know right where that sound came from. You can call to a Jake once at 400 yards and he walks right up to where you're standing and you only call him that one time and you're sitting there in camouflage and he knows right where that sound came from. You can give away your position. You're exposing yourself by calling. So they know right where that was. The beauty of it though is if they can just have good cover. Gruntbuck had some good cover there where he felt comfortable about coming closer and having a look. He pulled up through that cover and then went and had a look. That kind of stuff, that's what you're hoping for. You know, that he can move to you, or he'll move sideways and try and wind you. And either way, if he's moving and you're not, you can get him. You've got a chance when he's moving. You're likely to see him, likely to have a window where you can get a shot. Yeah, yeah. We've got one other. Don't we have another buck here?
You got the one
on top.
The one on top.
Yeah. So I'm going over the mountain. I'm looking for a track. I'm busting up over. I get to the top. It's fairly decent up there. Kind of moosey woods. I come onto a 140-pound track, 30-pound track. Could be a doe. Nothing I'm really interested in, but it's kind of going my way. It goes out around a whole big thick spot and it lays down on the other side of a thick spot. That's generally what they like to do. They'll move, eat, feed, or whatever, and if there's a blowdown, go around the blowdown and lay down. I think the coyotes teach them that kind of stuff, that they've got something in between everything. And also too, I couldn't believe this deer didn't smell me because my wind is headed right through kind of where it was. It jumps up and kangaroos a little bit. I call. As soon as it gets in the air and it's going, that's the time to call. Also too, if you need to move to see it and it's running, you move while it's moving. Right? The thing hops up and starts jumping and goes into some cover and I know there's a shooting lane and it takes off, I'm gone. Right? Get right over there so when it pops out, now I'm ready to go. I do that, I move over and I don't see it. But I think it's standing there and I'm not sure. So I turn on the camera and I said it should be right here, and sure enough, there it is. Now of course at the time I'm thinking it's a doe and it's not, it's a 4-pointer. And we see it later on in the film and he jumps out and he goes. Just the way he ran. Is there any other deer around? The way he went right there, I'm saying nope, it's all by himself. You can kind of get that feel from him, the way he ran. He just the way he did it, it's like, oh, I'm out of here. He's also running off fairly gently. He's used to seeing moose. That is a moose area, and he was laying down in the middle of that moose area. Just because there's moose around, that's oftentimes a good thing. A lot of deer will use the moose as a signal. They'll pull up to it, go out around it, be on the other side. If the moose all of a sudden bust and go crazy, the deer knows something's up, right? It's like a warning sign type thing. You'll see that quite a bit. The way he jumped off and moved right there, I got a chance to film it a little bit. If that had been a big racker, I was done. That didn't happen. Ooh. And it would have been a kind of Hail Mary kind of thing there. I'd have had the gun up and I might have gotten a shot, but boy, that'd have been really super tough.
I was bow hunting in New York City, and I was at a clearing, and I was in a ground blind, and the squirrel saw me, and he couldn't shut up. He was squawking the whole freaking time. I was there, giving warning to anybody, if any animal around, he wouldn't shut up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right?
It's like,
Yeah.
what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Shut this thing up.
Well, it doesn't have to shut up. Like, don't let that bother you. Let him do his thing and don't let it bother you. I don't know how many deer I've watched and the squirrels are freaking and jumping around, chasing each other and everything else, and the deer's like, whatever, doing their thing and not paying attention. That doesn't mean that all deer would flip out about it, but like when things bother you, don't let it bother you.
Of the deer in the area that something's not right.
Well, they might pay attention a little bit, and when they're not seeing much and nothing really moves all that much, they'll go back to their business. There'll be times in the woods where you ought to take it easy. You'll get this feeling, I'm just going to stand here for a minute. And there'll be other times when you say, oh, I got to go. Right? Just listen to you, like in your own flow. It matters like crazy, because I don't know how many times you've gotten a feeling something's watching me, and you turn around and there it is, right? When you're in your natural state of flow and you're in the woods, and it comes to you that I ought to just be quiet and let this squirrel do his business, do it. And if it feels like I need to move because I'm in the wrong place, get the hell out of there. Go where it is. If it's a lay around day and it feels like you ought to be taking it easy, do just that. A lot of times I will use what all the other animals are doing to tell me what I'm after is doing. If I see one partridge in the road and he's picking grit, that means almost a lot of partridges are probably picking grit right now. Hunt the road. Right? So I'm using that pattern all the time. The bass fisherman will pull up to the dock, launch his boat, and he'll drop down a color in front of the pumpkin seeds at the dock, and oh, they don't care about yellow, and puts on a green and drops it down, and they attack it, and he says, oh, green is the color for today, and jumps in his boat, rides out there, and goes boom, and wham, and they're on green, right? Whatever's going on, if the moose are laying down and chewing their cuds, odds are good the deer are doing the same exact thing. Like whatever all the other animals are doing and it feels like they should be doing, odds are good that's what's happening. So you can change your strategies by doing that, by feeling it. And if it feels like you ought to wait for that squirrel to shut up and move on, wait. And if it feels like who cares, I go who cares.
If you want to pin him to the tree,
Punk.
Hunt squirrel season in that spot.
Right, yeah. Later on you could straighten that out. Yep. Any questions?
no. Let them fly. There's a lot of people. Ask something basic. A lot of people, don't have the knowledge you do. So if you even have anything, let it rip.
A lot of times there's just as good of people sitting in the crowd everywhere, and they don't say much, and really should, because there's a lot of different stuff that matters.
What are you guys doing right now to prepare?
To prepare?
So we have the free time.
If you said, okay, get ready for deer season a little bit, I would shoot. I shoot. I love shooting. I want shooting to be second nature. At the other hunt stock, they asked everybody, what would you do for making your shooting better? What I did with the boys when they were young is I said, here, dry fire. I had them dry fire and dry fire and dry fire and dry fire and learn this over and over and over, and they got good at it. And when it goes click, were you on the target or not? Get used to the click. Where's the crosshair at the click every time? That matters like crazy. Now we put the 22s to them, and I brought brick after brick after brick of 22s, and I said, shoot them till they're gone. I'll give you some more. I made them shoot so much that they were bored with it. Then when they're bored with it, I would cover up the scope, and now bring them to the gravel pit or whatever so they can see their bullets hit. And I want you to shoot without aiming. Just point and shoot, and get good at pointing and shooting with no sights. After a while, when that buck jumps up at point blank and you got your bolt scope and that thing jumps up and you go pow like that and shoot it, it's dead. Right? Don't even have to aim. It's amazing how good you will get the more you shoot. It'll be in a weekend, you'll be 10 times better than you were at the beginning of the weekend. Just shoot and shoot and shoot, because you want to maximize the 3 seconds that buck gives you. If you're tracking and he gives you 3 seconds, if he gives you 5 seconds, it's been a long time. That 4-pointer, how much time did he give you? Right? Didn't give me no time, hardly at all. Just enough to finish getting the gun on him and maybe pull the trigger and hopefully be on target. His, same thing, right? 5, 6, 7 seconds of, yeah, I'm coming, and his body's exposed. You can see him a little bit. Boom, right? The first good shot you get, take it. Right? Just put it right in there. Don't wait around, put it right in there. And that would have been difficult because of that explosion off to the side. Like, they don't give you much time. And when you get a 5-year-old that's on it, he will be the same as that one that exploded. He'll be just like that. That's how them big ones got big.
Yeah. Get your body and your supplemental deer hunting skills so tuned up you don't have to think about it.
You want that power to be automatic.
Shape before season. We actually know, does anyone know who Daniel Horner is for SIG? 16-time world champion, triple gun. This dude's phenomenal. Best shot in the world, literally. Does 1,000 dry fires a day.
Click, 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 click with that pistol.
Right. 16-time world champion still does 1,000 dry fires a day. 1,000, right? It's basic, but it's so important to keep all of those little things second nature so your mind can be paying attention to what's in front of you and not all the other little things that you have to do, right? Practice with your gear, make sure you have all your stuff, and when you practice shooting, wear your coat that you hunt in, right? Because you go to the range, you're shooting in a t-shirt, and then you get your coat on, you're like, it doesn't feel like it did all summer long, right? go out, use your gear, get it out, put it on, refamiliarize yourself before you go out in the woods. That way, the only thing you're getting in shape is just your brain, right? That has to be during the season.